Hi everyone, my name is MWN Hydropump, or I/UN2, or my real name is Mitchell. And this past weekend, I played in the Edison Legends tournament. It was an online tournament, and about 123 players played, and I ended up getting third place with my Dragon Turbo deck. Uh, so I'd like to give a few shout outs. Shout out to my friend Belvedere. He's been testing with me uh, the past couple weeks now, and I actually had this deck, been using this deck on and off, but I had it fairly inconsistent the past month, and I made a few changes just for fun, just to test against whatever deck he was trying to test with, and then uh, I actually was doing pretty good with the deck testing against him. So he told me that he's like, "Yo, you need to play this deck." I was kind of hesitant at first because I wanted to play Vayu for the tournament, but after playing this deck in ranked around like last Thursday or so, Wednesday or Thursday, I played like 4 ranked matches and just demolished everyone with the deck. So I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna stick with this, and yeah, it worked out pretty well. But the month leading up to the tournament or so, that's why I just started getting into the Edison format, and I kind of had in mind like this Dragon Turbo deck that I've been wanting to make, and so I started messing with things, uh, pretty much any option out there for like this draw power, dragons, and everything, and just looking at all these interactions. And the deck was fairly inconsistent at first. Tested it a lot, and I kind of just left it on the back burner for a couple weeks as I tried out different decks. But I came back to this deck because I had a couple ideas, things that I wanted to change to the deck, and I think it worked out pretty well. There was no major changes I would want to make, but yeah, I'm just gonna get right into the deck profile, explain like every deck choice or card choice in the deck, and then uh, I'll go over particular matchups and like things that happen throughout the tournament, and yeah, so I'm just gonna jump right into it. So I kind of sorted the deck and like engine cards, and I'll just go talk about them. So started off with 3 Debris Dragon. Debris Dragon is you might think Debris Dragon's a little much because you're not realistically going to summon Debris Dragon like 3 times, but it is a Dragon Tuner with 1,000 tech or less, so it meets the requirements for cards of consonants. So that's primarily why you're using 3, but it also helps with the OTK push that this deck can provide. It gives you 2 dragon monsters that you can put on the field, such as White Stones of Legend, the banish for the Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, and also you have a Card Trooper as a target to bring back for a potential Black Rose or Ancient Fairy play. Sadly, outside of that, the Redragon doesn't have too much utility. You can't really go into the low 8 pool or any other synchro plays with the Redragon because you can't use him with any other level 4s, sadly. So that's about all the utility with the Redragon, but that's already enough. I mean, the Redragon gets you a draw 2, it gets you an extra guy on the board, it turns into a Black Rose, so it does a lot for the deck, and I don't really see myself playing any less than 3. The next card is the White Stone of Legend. This card is another Dragon Tuner with cards of consonants. It's a level 1, which does come up in the synchro plays and such. And then when sent to the grave, it fetches you Blue Eyes. So this is a really cool card in the deck. I really like it a lot because it just does so much. It gives you a +1 whenever you discard it or just do anything with it with Blue Eyes, and then you can do other things with Blue Eyes on top of that. So it's a really cool card. It has a lot of utility behind it. And then we got Flame Guard. It's pretty much the same exact thing as Waystone Legend as far as like purpose, but it's worse because it doesn't get you the Blue Eyes. But this was my 40th, technically 36 card, or if you want to say that, because I'm playing upstarts, to where I wasn't really sure what else to play. I didn't want to play like some bricky card. It was kind of between three things. It was Guard, Flamevale Guard, Dandelion, or Dragon's Mirror. Which Dragon's Mirror is kind of win more. I mean, it just slaps a five-headed dragon out of nowhere, or potentially a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. But yeah, this kind of just win more, because if you get to that point, you're probably just gonna win, where you have your this grave loaded, and then you have Dandelion, to where Dandelion plus the Dragon could potentially get you to the level 8 plays, but it's kind of out of the way. You would have to have a token already on the field with Dandelion, so you would have to send Dandelion to the grave, summon Debris Dragon to get Dandelion back out, go into a level 8. And I was also concerned about the tokens, Dandelion tokens, clogging the field, because if you're trying to go for Darkness Metal Dragon plays, those aren't dragons, they're plants, so they're just gonna be sitting there doing pretty much nothing when you're trying to spam the field. So I decided against Dandelion. So I went with Flamevale Guard because it's probably the most consistent thing. This is kind of like a blank, kind of like Upstart, where it works with cards of consonance, so it gives you 7 targets there, which is more than enough. Onto the level 8s, we have 3 Blue Eyes. This is a must in the deck. You have to run 3 Blue Eyes. Most broken card. Whenever I draw Blue Eyes, I know I'm gonna win. Jokes aside, yeah, Blue Eyes is great because you added off White Stone of Legend, and then that's pretty much all it's used for. I mean, you trade it in, discard it, and then yeah, I mean, it's a free card when you ditch it off stone, so, or get it off stone. And then the other level 8 is White Knight Dragon. This is a good card to summon off of Darkness Metal because it can't be targeted with spells or traps, and then it has this niche effect where you can pop your own spell and have your opponent's monster ram into this instead of another monster. That can probably come up if you have like Drago in the field, where your opponent wants to kill Drago but they can't because this is on the field. So that's probably the only instance where it usually comes up, and maybe Darkness Metal if they want to try to get rid of this too. So it kind of protects your board, but it's also a good level 8 monster. Probably the best level 8 monster aside from Blue Eyes to have. So it's just a 4th one because you don't want to just go with 3 for just the trade-ins. And the reason I have 7 targets for cards of consonance and only 4 for trade-in is because if you discard White Stone, that technically gets you the Blue Eyes. So if you count these are like technically like, this is technically like 3 card of consonance and then 3 trade-in targets. These you just have to find a way to discard them to get to the Blue Eyes. So that's why I use that ratio, and it worked out pretty well. And then we got the 3 Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. And this card is amazing. Just spam the field. Generally, the OTK with this deck is that you pretty much draw all the cards in your deck, and then your opponent's gonna have some stuff in the field. And you go Heavy Storm or Giant Trunade, and then you summon Debris Dragon, usually. Debris Dragon gets you White Stone, and then you just banish White Stone and Debris Dragon for 2 Red Eyes Darkness Metals, which get you White Knight Dragon and Kawaki Mirror Drago. So that's probably a lot of damage right there. I mean, that's about 10,000 damage. Upstarts do come into the factor, but usually it doesn't matter, and I don't regret playing Upstart at all in this deck. But anyways, yeah, Darkness Metal. I remember when I first started making this deck, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with Darkness Metal. Like, I didn't really have a win condition with this deck when I first made it about a month ago, and then this kind of formed into like, okay, I had to max out on Darkness Metal Dragon. This card is just nuts. It does so much for the deck. It's like the main way to OTK. So yeah, definitely 3 of this card. And the reason I was hesitant of playing 3 to begin with, because it wasn't really, it's like a finisher card or extender, and it doesn't really get your deck going. Like, you can't trade in, you can't cards of consonance. It just kind of sits in your hand, but you want to draw into these once your engine's going. And if you have nothing really going for you, you can just, summon stone, and then banish special summon this and get something from the grave. So it's a fair play there. And then probably one of my favorite cards, utility cards in the deck, is Kwakimu Drago. This pretty much ensures you're going to OTK your opponent despite what they have. If you clear the back row, and then you can deal with like whatever monsters on the field, which is usually between having all these beaters you can. It's just gonna be just the ultimate shutout card, and it works really good against the current meta as well. So having one of this is really good, because you're always pretty much gonna get it in the grave most likely. And I'll just explain what you do. So say you do the Debris Dragon, play it with Darkness Metal. You summon, get Stone, special summon Red Eyes Darkness Metal, get Blue Eyes or White Knight off it, and then special summon another Darkness Metal, banishing the Stone, and then you get the Drago. And then Drago prevents either player from special summoning lights or darks, so it pretty much turns off all the battle hand trap monsters, Battle Fader, Tragodia, or Gores, which are the 3 cards that usually keep people alive in most situations of like that, where they're scared of getting OTK'd. So like something like Frog Monarch, that this deck just cleans that up, because you can break their field relatively easy, and then you just OTK them, and they have nothing for defense. So, and then like any other deck that main decks those, you don't have to worry about it. So it's really reassuring that you have this card to make sure your OTK goes through. Because otherwise it would be kind of sketchy. You're putting a lot of investment into these big monsters, and then if your opponent drops Gores or Tragodia, you're like, well, that's kind of rough. So this is a really great card in my opinion. And then for the last dragon in my main deck, I use Red Eyes Wyvern. Wyvern was okay. I kind of had an issue between like what the ratio of Darkness Metal and Wyvern was at the start. Like I was trying like 2 and 2 for a while, and I was like, doesn't really, because Wyvern's like essentially a brick. To be honest, it doesn't really do anything. It kind of like, it's not a tuner, it's not a level 8. It's just a utility dragon, and it primarily only comes up his effect when you Future Fusion first. When you can dump this and Darkness Metal. Like the classic dragons or the regular dragon deck, they usually dump like 2 Wyverns, 2 Darkness Metal, or something like that, and then they can just special summon 2 Darkness Metal at the end phase. That's not what this deck's really going for. You just want to like, I'll explain what the Future Fusion play is, but you don't really go for the Wyvern too much. And I often side this card out because it's just kind of underwhelming for the most part, but I still like it in the main deck for an option to have. So I still like it, the card, but it's definitely, you definitely don't want to see multiple of it. I think it's great at 1. So, and then a really cool utility card in this deck is Card Trooper. Like when I first started making this deck, it was primarily all dragons, but I kind of added like Card Trooper, Gore, and Tragodia in because they just had so much utility. So Card Trooper, it's obviously a debris target, but you can also mill, potentially hitting stuff like Whitestone, and then you have all these spell cards for Magical Stone Excavation to hit, so you can technically like mill a Super Rejuve and discard 2 dragons, add Super Rejuve back, and then activate this, and then you'll draw 2 cards at the end phase at least. So, and then you also have Pot of Avarice as well, just to fuel the grave for monsters. So I've had plenty of times where it's like I have 2 or 3, I have like 3 or 4 monsters maybe in the grave, and then I mill 2, and then makes Pot live, so that's great. And then on top of that, it also replaces itself when he dies, so it's kind of like an upstart goblin in a sense, but a little bit more utility. And then you also have the factor where he can beat over like a problem monster, like he can crash with a Thunder King Ryo, which sometimes could be a obstacle. I mean, Thunder King's obviously not super popular in this format, but there's a couple players playing it, and it does hinder the Whitestone, the legend play, searching that. So it's a really cool card. And then yeah, you can also crash over something like Ashura. So yeah, Card Trooper is great. And then we have Gores and Tragodia as my final monsters. Obviously, I don't run any traps or defense, so these cards are really great. Initially, when I first made this deck, they were in the side deck, because I wasn't really trying to. I was just trying to make this like as turbo as possible. But I realized about like last week I was like, yeah, I want to try these cards in the main deck because I think this is really worth it. Even though Gores can technically like conflict with Future Fusion, it really doesn't come up that much. Because you're gonna draw like a million cards off of Rejuve, and then you're gonna have one of these two in your hand, and your opponent's gonna have to OTK you or kill you somehow, and then you just drop one of these, and then it's pretty much game over. And that's what makes these cards so great. Is like you can do nothing and then like have one of these in hand, and then it just completely flips the game upside down for the opponent. Because I mean, I've had a couple games in the tournament where Gores or Tragodia single-handedly just beat the opponent. I think it was like Blackwing and Vayu. They just really had a tough time outing these cards. So they were just great. Even if my hand wasn't like amazing, they were just like really MVP cards because Tragodia, your hand's always gonna be like massive. So I mean, I've had times more than likely Tragodia's gonna be at 3600 attack, and then Gores is just gonna be massive. Also, another thing I wanted to bring up, Waystone Legend. This is how you get to your level 8 plays. That's why I run level 8 synchros. Because Waystone Legend can synchro with the Gores token, or Gores himself. And then you get to the Colossal Fighter, Dark End Dragon, and then Red Dragon, Stardust. It doesn't really come up very much, but it's an option. So I like that. And that was another reason why I added Gores, because it gives you the possibility of right there. And then on top of that, Gores itself is just another beater. Like I had a game where I had like a massive OTK because I had Gores token, Red Eyes Darkness Metal, and like Drago, and then it was this game. I think Tragodia, I can't remember exactly, but I think I had a game where I stole something relevant. I can't remember off the top of my head, but in the tournament. So, but yeah, Tragodia's just I just straight up won versus a Blackwing player or Vayu. I can't remember which one exactly, but I just Tragodia'd and just beat him down. Just like turn after turn, you couldn't do anything about it. And another thing, like you look at this deck and you're probably like, well, it's kind of like gets hurt by oppression pretty hard, and it can if I mean you're gonna eventually dig for Giant Trunade or Heavy Storm, but like if you're getting floodgated out like that by oppression, like Gores and Tragodia are just like so amazing. Because then you have these two massive monsters, then your opponent can't special summon to out it, like something like I don't know, like make it something bigger than these guys. And even if they happen to make a little late synchro, you can usually take it with Blue Eyes with the Tragodia effect. Anyways, yeah, that was another reason why I wanted to use these guys, because they get under oppression, which is pretty crucial. So I think that's about it. What I wanted to say about the monsters. So we're just gonna jump into the spells. Obviously, this deck has a lot of draw spells, and you kind of need them. And I'll explain why. So you have 3 cards of Consonance and 3 Trade-In. These are like the best spell cards in your main deck as far as like getting your engine going, because you're discarding dragons and then you're drawing 2 cards. So it's with Waystone of Legend, you're just getting a +1 when you're discarding that, and then so if you have cards of Consonance, Waystone of Legend, Trade-In, it's gonna be pretty crazy. You're gonna discard 2 dragons and then end up drawing 4 cards. And then by that point, you're gonna have like something like Super Rejuve, Magical Stone, Future. You have so many good cards. Like once you start digging, it's kind of crazy. So these cards were like really MVP. They get you to your power cards, and so that's why they're so important. And then you got Magical Stone Excavation. It's kind of like, I guess it's kind of more so similar to Pilot of Avarice, but like they're discard cards, so they help fuel Super Rejuve. But another cool thing is that, like I said, with Card Trooper, if you mill your spells, you can add them back with this. If you have a really important spell in the grave, like you just activate Giant Trunade, or your opponent activates Dark Bribe or Solemn Judgment, you can Stone Excavation for it back, or you can get, it's really the ultimate utility card. You can get back at all your spells pretty much, and then you're also discarding dragons, which fuels the Rejuve. And getting onto the Super Rejuve, This card's amazing because you have so many ways to discard dragons. It's really insane. And I know like Dragon Rulers was the deck that made this really popular and which is why it got banned, but I feel like decks in other formats can also really abuse this card and things just get really crazy. So me looking back at these formats personally, I'm surprised decks didn't run some turbo variant of dragons running Super Rejuve because this card is just absolutely insane. Like I had a couple games in the tournament where I drew 15 cards off Super Rejuve on the end phase, and then proceed to OTK the next turn. That's usually like the win con. You discard a bunch of dragons, draw a bunch of cards, and then on the end phase you Super Rejuve, draw even more cards. Obviously you have to discard a bunch of those cards, but you pretty much get stuck with the 6 best cards in your deck, and then you just win next turn. So that was pretty much the theory behind the deck, the win con that I came up with a couple weeks ago. It's a really amazing card, and the fact that you can draw 5, and then if you want the other copies is in those 5, you can just activate that and draw 5 more. It's pretty quite crazy that this is a quick play spell card. But yeah, I'll get into all the cool ways you can discard dragons and kind of abuse this card. And then obviously you have a card destruction, which this card is absolutely insane. You discard all your dragons, and then this fuels Super Rejuve. Pot of Avarice, it's a really cool card because you have a lot of times where you just blow through your blue eyes and white stones really quickly, or you're discarding all your dragons with card destruction or whatnot. So you're gonna burn through a lot of your monsters. So you kind of need Pot of Avarice to recycle that stuff, and you're gonna be through so many cards in your deck where it's like, okay, I got through all my draw cards, I have a bunch of cards in my hand, now I need to recycle back my monsters so I can like reuse them again. So say you go through your whole deck and you have like 5 or 10 cards left. You activate Pot of Avarice, and then you get like 2 to 3 debris dragon. You get Bright Eyes, Dark Dispels, stones, and blue eyes as back to your deck, and then you're gonna probably draw a copy or 2, and then you can activate even more draw spells to get to those other cards, the other missing pieces. So it's a really crazy combo that you can just like do between these cards. It's completely recycle your deck. And now we're gonna get to the God card, the 4th God card I like to call it, Future Fusion. This card is just it's backbreaking, man. I mean, obviously it's backbreaking in Dragon, like the normal Dragon deck, because they Gold Sark for it. They want to see the card as soon as possible, but I don't really think Gold Sark's really good in this deck because you're just trying to draw infinitely to get to this. Whereas kind of like outside of like turn 1 Gold Sark, you never want to see it. Like you don't want to do trade in, draw 2 cards, and see Gold Sark. You want to see Super Rejuve and get to like the power cards like Future Fusion. You don't want Gold Sark for it. And also, it just makes it really awkward when you Gold Sark, Future Fusion away, and then you're stuck with like draw cards. So it's like, I'm taking out the card out of my deck that I want to draw into. So yeah, I definitely tested Gold Sark, but it wasn't good. It was really conflicting with the deck strategy. But anyways, back to Future Fusion, the 4th God card. Pretty much, you want to you activate this and you ditch. Pretty much, I'll show all the targets that you can ditch. Primarily, you want to ditch 2 to 3 white stones to add 2 to 3 blue eyes white dragons. So you go plus there, and then that fuels the trade-ins and anything else. Card destruction, like the best combo in your deck is Future Fusion and the card destruction. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But if you do that, you pretty much just win the game on the spot, because you're gonna do Future Fusion, add 2 or 3 blue eyes, go plus 2. Well, 1 or 2 at least, and then you card destruction, discarding a bunch of dragons, and then you're bound to draw Super Rejuve at some point. Anyways, yeah, you can dump Wyvern and Red Eyes to summon him at the end phase. You can it's nice to dump Draco in the grave because it doesn't really do anything in your deck. You're not really trying to normal summon Draco. You're just trying to special summon off Darkness Metal from the grave. So I usually dump Draco. That's a good target. White Knight Dragon sometimes, but it's usually better to keep this in the deck because it's at least a little weight compared to Draco, where it's just like a level 4. So those are just the main ones. You definitely want to send stones, and then maybe a copy of this, and then copy of this for sure. I never summoned 5-headed dragon in the tournament. I don't think, maybe once. Usually the opponent's just dead at that point. So yeah, Future Fusions is crazy. And then even if you draw so many cards, like you get through your whole deck, you don't even have to have Future Fusion. You just discard it. One, because you probably don't have enough dragons in your deck, but you also want to draw them. And then two, you can just OTK on the next turn, so Future Fusion doesn't even matter. So it's pretty good when you don't need to activate Future Fusion for you to win. So yeah, but the card is absolutely amazing. I'm just shell shocked that people don't abuse this card more while they can. Okay, so this is another utility card, kind of similar to Card Trooper and the Gores and Tragodia and all that, but it's this is a card I came up with last week, about like Monday or Tuesday. Is Instant Fusion. So this deck kind of like lacks a way to get to the extra deck. Like the only way you can realistically get to the extra deck is like White Stone plus like Gores and Tragodia. Doesn't really sound that great. Debris Dragon with Card Trooper, that's about it you can do with that. So I really wanted to find a way to gain access to the extra deck, and the best way I found for that was Instant Fusion. Now Instant Fusion is really cool because it has a couple, it's kind of flexible. You can summon Dark Fire Dragon or Musician King off it, so it's really cool that way. Dark Fire Dragon is a level 4, so if you do that and White Stone, it gets you to the level 5 play Catastor or Magical Android, which is neat. It has a little bit of utility there. And but mainly Dark Fire Dragon's a dragon with our Darkness Metal Dragon. So you can go like a problem I had with the deck is like if your opponent like stops your normal summon, like they know that you don't really have too many dragon extenders, so if you like have to normal summon a White Stone to summon Darkness Metal, for instance, and they just Book a Moon or Wing Blast your White Stone, it's like well, I passed turn. Like you don't have a Monster Reborn or anything to get another dragon on the field, so that's why Instant Fusion was really good to me, because it was an extra dragon to put on the field just to summon Darkness Metal Dragon. And it won me a couple games just having the extra body just banish or make a synchro play with. And then on top of that, it gives you a way to funny enough, it gives you a way to, like, if you do the synchro play in the Catastor Android, you can just summon White Stone and then Instant Fusion in this, or Musician King, and then it gives you a way to add Blue Eyes, so you can trade in Blue Eyes off that just by summoning this. Gives you a good way to like search Blue Eyes pretty much. I just sort of sorted everything by accident, but anyways, the next cards were obviously the win cons: Heavy Storm, Giant Trunade. Pretty much you just dig through your whole entire deck. You don't need MST or any trap stuns or decrees in the main deck. You dig through your entire deck and you're bound to find one of these cards, and then you just activate it. Your opponent usually doesn't have anything. My opponent never did. If they do, you can just Magical Stone back one of these two, and then you just OTK. I mean, I've done that like pretty much all my games for the most part, when I just draw enough cards and get into these, and you just win. So not much to say other than that about those cards. They're just amazing. Giant Trunade in particularly, because they can't really do a lot. They can't Starlight Road Giant Trunade. And then the last three cards are Upstart Goblins. Upstart is really important just to have 3 less cards in your deck, pretty much, because you're just trying to draw. You don't want to play like cards that aren't necessary. And like I said, Flaming Veil Guard was the 36 card, so anything else probably would just be like unnecessary or not like this. Probably a dead draw in most instances. So Upstart was great. I never sided it out or anything. I always kept it in. So yeah, I don't think there would be anything I want to change with the main deck. Really, I felt like the main deck was pretty spot on, perfect. Like I can't think of anything I would want to change. As far as the main deck goes, as far as consistency, so I usually do like a 20 hand testing, where I just draw 20 hands and I rate them good, as in like I just combo off and win first turn, or medium to where it's like, okay, I take like a turn or two to set up, but I have like a really good hand still, where I can actually play. And then like bad is like I just brick and I can't do anything at all. That's how I rated like the 20 hand test. Early on when I was testing this deck, I would have like anywhere between like 4 to 7 bricks out of 20 hands, which is like really bad. But I got the deck down to, I did 20 test hands, and I think I got 7 good hands where you actually just win off the spot, which is pretty good. And then 12 medium hands, which is like you just play like a turn or two and then you just win. And then I only had 1 brick hand, where it's like I couldn't do anything. So that was by far like the best results I had as far as what the 20 hand testing thing goes. Obviously you're kind of like interacting with your opponent, but I still feel like that was pretty amazing. I mean, I feel like any deck's probably gonna brick like at least 1 time out of 20 hands, for the most part in this format. So I just think that was a really good ratio, so that's why I also went with this deck, because I was like, wow, that's actually really good. So yeah, main deck I probably wouldn't change much at all, if anything. Nothing really stuck out to me. I'll just jump into the extra deck real quick. There's not like a whole lot to talk about, but yeah, I already glanced over Darkfire Dragon and explained him. 5-headed dragons, obviously for future fusion play. Musician King. This one's really cool because obviously the level 5 for the White Stone, so you can use level 6 access, and it's a spellcaster too. So pretty much your level 6s are Brio, Goyo, and Tempest Magician. Tempest Magician is a special one, but Brio and Tempest, they both have effects where they discard cards. So if you synchro with White Stone, it gives you a free Blue Eyes to discard. So a free card to discard, and then you have anything else you want to discard. So you can technically like, you can synchro. This is where Instant Fusion is really good, because you can have like a hand of like Instant Fusion, White Stone, Super Rejuve, and like 2 other dragons, and then you end up drawing like 3 or 4 cards at least on the end phase, because you can do like Brio, bounce everything your opponent has, and then you just draw cards because you discarded cards at the end phase. And then you have Tempest Magician, where this is probably better first turn compared to Brio, like if you're going first, but you can do that play. Burn your opponent for like 3k, and then you just draw cards at the end phase, and then potentially burn it for another 3k next turn, or it's a really good finisher card. It's kind of like Dark Strike Fighter in a sense in this deck. So Tempest Magician, anyways. So I never summoned Tempest Magician in the tournament, but like in my testing, it came up a couple times. It also just gives you that cheap shot like win, where it's like, okay, your opponent's like, because sometimes like your opponent could be like, if you upstart 3 times, you can do like end phase play, or not end phase, but main phase 2, like Instant Fusion to get this guy out, that Tempest Magician, just burn them from game. So that's really cool. I summoned Brionic a couple times. I never did like the Brionic Rejuve play, where you discard a bunch of dragons and draw cards off it, but it's definitely there in theory. Summon Catastor a couple times probably. Catastor's just Catastor. Ancient Fairy Dragon might have came up once. Never summon Armory Arm, but you can technically summon Armory Arm with White Stone and Card Trooper, but more so probably like Tragodia and Card Trooper. If it ever comes up, you can probably like make something like a black metal really big. It came up once, and so in testing like a couple weeks ago, so it was like worthwhile using, because I mean you're just gonna use a bunch of random synchros anyways. Black Rose obviously for the card trooper to replay. Colossal Fighter, I never summoned this, but you know, if there's ever an instance where you can summon it for, you know, in a Dragon Mirror match where you can bring this out and crash through all their darkness metals, I mean that's good enough to play. Dark End Dragon, you can summon this with Gores and Whitestone, because Gores is a dark, so that's pretty cool. Non-targeting removal, kind of like Scrap Dragon, in a sense just getting rid of cards for free. Goyo Guardian, I never summoned Goyo, but you know, I'm not gonna play. You have to use Goyo. Android came up a couple times. It's actually kind of significant against the Vayu matchup because you can summon this and it's bigger than their Armed Wing. So if you know they're gonna have like a recursion play, you can simply just go like Darkfire and Stone to get Android, and they can't crash over it. So it just keeps you in the game. And on top of that, it also makes Instant Fusion only pay, you know, 400 instead of 600, or 1,000, which is kind of funny. Red Dragon Arching. This was the last card in Extra Deck. Definitely doesn't come up very much, but you know he's big, and you can, if your opponent's just walling behind a bunch of Dandelion tokens, you can OTK that way. Stardust Dragon. It's Stardust Dragon. So yeah, that's pretty much all the Extra Deck. I didn't really go into it too much, but like the theory is definitely there, and the situations definitely come up. So, alrighty, so onto the side deck. I'm gonna try and make this quick, but the side I'm just gonna sort this with the cards I sided and did not side. So these are all the cards I did not side. I did not side the third Drago, but I did side the second one. I never sided in Crow. I never sided in Morphing Jar. I never sided in Brain Control. I never sided in Mind Control. And I never sided in MST. I did side in the second Drago, the 2 Lightning Vortexes, the 2 My Body as a Shield, the 2 Warlords, and the 2 Decree. So pretty much technically half my side deck I always use in the tournament, and I'll explain why. So pretty much I built my side deck knowing that I'm gonna have a bunch of draw cards. Like I'm gonna be able to draw into my side deck cards even though if I'm not using 3. So like I never want to use like 3 Warlords because I never want to see like 2 copies in my opening hand. Like that would just be awful. Like 2 copies of Warlords. I mean it wouldn't be awful, but you know you're not really getting anywhere. I'd rather draw a bunch of cards, get to Warlords, and then have stuff on top of that, rather than just Warlords itself and then nothing going for myself. So yeah, nothing more than 2 copies. That was kind of like why I also didn't side in the third Drago, because I would already have 2 Drago. But I did side in the second one against like Lightsworn, Fairy, or Vayu, other dark decks such as that. But yeah, I'm just gonna go over the cards I side in, and then I'll go over the cards I didn't side in. But yeah, I just explained Drago is pretty much a win condition. Helps you push through OTKs, and it's really good against pretty much all the top decks. Like you can summon it against the Mirror, they can't summon Darkness Metal. You can summon it against Monarchs, they can't defend themselves. You can summon it against Vayu, they can't summon from the grave. You can bring it against Fairies, you just run over their floaters. It's a really strong card this format, so I like it. But I primarily brought in the second one for those matchups, and then like if the first one happens to get removed somehow, like I don't know, like Karma Cut, DD Crow, Gaius, then I'll be like, well, I don't have a Draco anymore, so that's why I brought in the second one. 2 Lightning Vortex. This was by far the best card in my side deck. I pretty much brought it into like any matchup where it wasn't a trap deck for the most part, and then yeah, pretty much it wasn't a trap deck because like any other deck, they're just probably gonna side in something like Fossil Dyna, Vanity's Fiend, or they have like Christia and stuff like that. So Lightning Vortex, I knew like that's what their game plan was against a deck like mine. So Lightning Vortex, you just dig through your entire deck, and then you just activate this, and then on top of that you discard a card, so it technically fuels your dragon, so it's good in that sense as well. So this was definitely the MVP of the side deck. And then 2 My Body as a Shield. This was originally Twisters as of like just over a week ago, but I was like, My Body as a Shield is way better against Blackwings in general, or like I make a big board and my opponent tries to like break it with like Dark Arm or whatnot, and it's also really good against a Royal Oppression because you can kind of like bait your opponent. You can go Summon Debris Dragon effect, they activate Oppression, My Body, or you already have a Darkness Metal up and you activate the effect if they have back row and you just My Body it. So it was really good in that sense, and it's also good against like the board wipes, like Torrential Tribute, Mirror Force. It just lets you play like it's pretty much like Starlight Road in this deck essentially, but it's a quick play, so this makes it that much better. Lets you OTK recklessly, so it's a really amazing card. At one particular time where I used My Body, I sided this. I wouldn't normally side this against Vayu, but I think one of my Vayu opponents was side decking or main decking Lightning Vortex because I saw it like game 2. So I brought this like a copy in game 3, and I had a Kawaki Mirror Drago on the field, face up on the field, I think, and I knew they had Raikou set, so I set this and I just let them go, and then they used Raikou to pop the Drago and activate My Body, which was like kind of crucial because I think they had the Raikou Caius play set up potentially, so it removed the monster for them to summon Caius with, so that was a big turning point in that game. The other side deck cards I used were 2 Warlords, 2 Decree. So the funny thing with this deck is like obviously I don't run any traps, so my opponent's like Heavy Storms, MSTs, True Nades are all gonna be dead. So ideally your opponent's gonna probably side out those cards against you potentially, and that's just gonna make your future fusion play even better, and then it makes these cards even better because they're not gonna see it coming or have outs to it. So Warlords is pretty much good against a lot of decks. You know, frogs, quick draw plants, and it's just a really flexible card. I liked it a lot. I never really got to abuse it more than like one time though. Actually, twice. I flipped it against a Frog Monarch guy, and he pretty much just like couldn't do anything. And then quick draw, it kind of like kept me in the game long enough to where I can win. So this card was like really good. And then Royal Decree, I only sided in once. Once or twice, because I didn't play like too many back row decks. It was against Blackwings like my first round or so, where I just decreed him and he just lost. I think I decreed his Icarus attack, and he just couldn't do anything. So he just pretty much lost right there. And then so the side deck cards I didn't use. I'll just put these back over here. I didn't use, so I kind of like knew I wasn't gonna side these cards very much. DD Crow would just be against like some crazy graveyard deck that's just like, you know, Phantom Chaos or something like that. And so I didn't really particularly want to draw this card because it doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't like advance my game state. But like if I'm playing some like really cheeky grave deck, then Crow can come in. Drago's kind of same thing, Phantom Chaos or some like turbo deck that focuses on lights or darks. I just knew I went sided in very much. Morphing Jar, probably against like some like really heavy trap deck where it gives me a easy way to draw something, or like a stun deck. Lets me draw an out pretty easily. So yeah, but never sided in. MST never sided in. I knew I wouldn't be a fan unless it's like some like stun deck again, like kind of like Morphing Jar situation. But like you're already drawing your deck so much, and you have these board wipes that True Nade and Heavy Storm, and MST only gets rid of one card. So, and there was no like Floodgate spell or trap card where it's like that these can't deal with. So I never sided in. Mind Control and Brain Control, these were primarily for the mirror match, because you can just take your opponent's Darkness Metal or Dragon and banish it for your own Darkness Metal and whatnot. So these are really strong in the mirror match. kind of like electric viruses, but spell form. So a little bit more flexible in that department. This is probably like the one card where I wish I probably sided it more, or potentially main decked it, but probably decided it more because I kind of ran into the problem where it's like, my opponent would just like kind of stick a Stardust Dragon, and I can't deal with it very easily because Lightning Vortex doesn't deal with it. So like maybe if like Absolute Zero in the future, I would probably side this in just because like that deck can make Stardust Dragon really easy, and it seems really like a card they would want to have because it protects their back row on top of it. So I think Brain Control would be a good side deck card against them. And also, it gives you a way to deal with their Absolute Zero is by just taking it, and then it's a free 25 beater for a turn, and then you don't have to pop it. So I think this would be really good because you can take their Stardust, banish it for Darkest Metal, and whatnot. So yeah, this would probably go in against Absolute Zero in the future. That was probably like the one thing I wish I did in the side deck. But yeah, that was pretty much the deck list overall. Again, not a lot I would want to change. The big thing about the side deck is just making sure you're not oversiding. I never sided more than 4 cards, I believe. And the main cards I usually sided out. I'll just pull them right aside here. Okay, I think that's about everything. So these were the primarily 5 ones I sided out. Card Trooper, Gores, and Tragodia usually came out when I'm siding in Warlords, obviously, because they're not dragons. So, and then like also this other form or like matchup dependent. Like I'm playing against like Gladiator Beast, Tragodia is not gonna be very good because they can just Vermillo it. Same thing about Card Trooper, you can just beat over Card Trooper and then they get a free effect. And then obviously these aren't gonna be good against like other slow decks too, where Decree and it's gonna be good. But these are great against like decks that can punch you in the mouth really quick. So, and then these came out a lot. Guard like 36 card, like I said, so it's an easy side out card. And then Wyverns is easy because it's honestly not that great in this deck, and I don't see it getting any better in the post side. And so I pretty much sided those out. And this is a card I sided out in a particular matchup. I think it was Quick Draw. So pretty much like game 2, I think I saw he DD crowed me like 3 times, I think. So game 3, I sided these out because I didn't want to get DD crowed. Like that's kind of like a brutal loss. You discard 2 cards and then your opponent DD crows the card you're trying to add. So you go like -2 there. So that was pretty hard. I mean, obviously you can still hit average, but it's like 1 less card DD Crow can interact with. So that was like the only time I sided those out. But yeah, those were the ones I sided out most of the time. Another big thing to take note of is like a couple days before, I made a side deck strategy for what the side in and out versus every deck that I expect to play. And it honestly really helps because you can just look at that really quick, or just know what you gonna side in and out rather than just sitting there for like 10 minutes trying to figure out like what you want to take out for this one card that you really want to side in. So yeah, having a side like strategy is like really important, especially for a deck like this where you only want to side like a couple of cards. And so you want to make sure you're siding correctly. So those were like the big takeaways. I was gonna briefly talk about like the matchups and stuff I played against. So round 1, I won against Blackwing 2-1. I think that was like one of the only losses where it's like, wow, my hand, this kind of sucks, and I just lose. So I was kind of worried because I think that was game 1 I lost, but I won the next 2. So I was like, oh, here we go, losing again because I bricked. But I did win the next couple games, I think. I played against Lightsworn next round. I won 2-1. It was a pretty close match overall. Game 1, I pretty much just lost because my opponent was able to add 2 Judgment Dragons off Beckoning Light, and I didn't have a way to access Drago, so that was kind of rough. So like no matter what, like I made a Stardust Dragon, but obviously it wasn't gonna stop 2 Judgment Dragons because they're gonna just crash over and then pop my field anyway. So I lost that game. Game 2, I just like popped off and like I think I just like drew like a million cards with Rejuve and just won. And I think I recall Game 3 being relatively close, but I ended up just winning at some point. Round 3, it was against Frog Monarch. This was probably like the biggest blowout that I won. I won 2-0. I feel like if I play against more Frog Monarch, I probably would just like that. Seems like it's such an easy matchup because they don't play back row, and then Drago just takes care of like their defense. So, but anyways, I think game 1 against Frog Monarch, I opened Card Destruction Future Fusion, which is like auto game. I drew through my entire deck that first turn, and he just lost. And then game 2, he set up the dupe lock early. I think I warlords him on standby phase, and so he set up dupe lock because he couldn't do anything, obviously. And I drew through my entire deck, and then Lightning Stormed his field and OTK'd. So it was pretty brutal. Round 4, I 2-0'd Vayu. I think that might have been where I might buy my body the shield. His lightning or his Reiko. And then I OTK'd him a couple games. I'm pretty sure. I think that's how it went. Then round 5, I played against Vayu. I won 2-1. That was a really close match. This is probably like one of the losses I could have prevented. There was like a lot of those I feel like I could have prevented, but I had like a field of like Darkness Metal, White Knight, and something else, and my hand was like Card Destruction, Rejuve, and a couple spells, but I didn't have anything to discard to like fuel the Rejuve. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna hold on to this stuff for like a turn, see if I draw into anything. And my opponent had like a handful of cards, so I didn't really just want Card Destruction to go like -1 and then to potentially draw some good cards, but they actually were on 3 Darks Engrave and summoned Dark Arm, and I just lost. So in hindsight, I should have been like, okay, they have 3 Darks Engrave, I need to get them off 3 Darks, and so Card Destruction, discard their hand, and then so it would have been a good -1 there, but that's in hindsight where they can just do like they could have just discarded like Soraku Vayu and then draw it in the Dark Arm. So I'm gonna try not to beat myself up too much about that loss, but I did win the match overall. What round is this? This is round 6. So quick draw, I won 2-1 against. That was probably like the craziest match overall. I just remember, I think I lost game 1 because he just kind of like beat me down really quickly, and I won game 2 and 3. That's kind of like the crazy thing about this deck is like you can lose game 1 and then just come back and just grind it out game 2 and 3. Whereas like most decks like this, like combo or turbo decks, it's like they usually win game 1 and then once post sighting they get like a little weaker. Where this deck, it's like it seemed like it almost got like a little bit better in a sense. It was kind of crazy because you get to side in such hate cards. So yeah, against Quick Draw, he had a game. I think it was game 2 where he used Snipe Hunter, and he was discarding volcanic shells, and then kept on probably averaging them back, but he landed on one like a lot of times, like 7 times or something like that. So he missed on Snipe Hunter so many times. And I think he's burned himself for like 3k just using volcanic shell over and over. So that was pretty crazy. I think it was pretty much like the same situation. He was on Vanity's Fiend for a while, sitting on it, and I just kept on like drawing for cards, digging for Lightning Vortex. I eventually got into it, and then this OTK'd from there. So that was how I was able to clear that. Vanity's Fiend. But he was under the Warlord's lock, so it was kind of funny. He was doing like Fiend beatdown for a while because he had Vanity's Fiend Sangan. I mean, it would have been just brutal if he got into Snipe Hunter on top of that, but he didn't at that time. But yeah, I think that's how that matchup went. And then so this was the last game. So if I round 7, if I win this, this was winners bracket or winners finals. So if I win this, I go to the finals. If not, I go to losers finals. I did lose to Diva Heroes 1-2. Game 1, I had a situation where I had Magical Stone in hand. I think. Okay, so this was the situation. So I had Instant Fusion, or I had Instant Fusion Engrave. I think I built it off a Card Trooper or something. And then I had Trade-In in hand. I had Trade-In, so I had these 3 in hand with Magical Stone. I did Magical Stone, discard Stone and Avarice for the grab back Instant Fusion, where I should have grabbed back Pot Avarice, because I did. My grave had like a monster or 2 on best, so I was like, I didn't want to Pot Avarice and then not have a way to activate it, because I didn't think I would draw too many monsters or get my engine going. But I actually did. I ended up loading up my grave, but I just needed more draw power, and then I think I added back Instant Fusion, but I didn't have a way to use it effectively, so it was just kind of dead. And my opponent just attacked me for, I think they put me under 1,000, so Instant Fusion was kind of dead at that point. So Pi Avarice, I think, would have won me that game. And then game 2 against Diva guy, I was pretty much OTK'd him. He didn't have anything. And then game 3 was really unfortunate. So I pretty much drew through my entire deck, and I think I had about 10 cards left in deck. So imagine these are my last 10 cards. I had 1 Darkness Metal in hand, and I was just doing my draw spell things. And I just Pot Avarice this stuff back. So I think I had like a Trade-In and then like Card of the Constant. So if I draw like these, I can draw into the Debris and Darkness Metals, which I need those. I need a Debris Dragon and a Darkness Metal to OTK them that turn and win game 3. But I think and Darkness Metal is pretty much my only dragon in hand. So I drew off Trade-In, and I think I drew like something like this, whereas like I can't do anything, just like 2 random spells, and so I just lost. So I got pretty unlucky with that, because if I would draw these, I could just discard them to draw some more, and if I draw these, I just win. But I drew like the 2 random spells out of the 10 cards or so. I think that's what it was off the top of my head. So that was a really unfortunate loss. And then versus Blackwing in the losers final, so technically for third or for second place, I pretty much bricked game 1. I didn't open very well, and he opened pretty good. And then game 2, I had Instant Fusion, Pot of Avarice, White Stone, White Knight, and Darkness Metal going first. I had those 5 and something else. But I Future Fusion and dumped a bunch of stuff and got 2 Blue Eyes in my hand. And then I activate Pot Avarice. He DD Crowed the Darkness Metal, and I had sided out Wyvern, but it didn't matter at that point. So even if I had it for Future Fusion, because he had 2 DD Crows. But anyways, so I summoned White Stone and special summon Darkness Metal. And this is where I messed up. I had dumped Draco, but he didn't banish it off DD Crow. So I could have just done Darkness Metal, special summon DD Crow, but instead I did Darkness Metal, special summon White Knight, and he pretty much Dark Armed me next turn. So, and I just lost because of that. So I think, and I should have summoned the Draco, because he would have to out the Draco to do anything, the special summon, and like do some aggressive play, because he has to kill the Draco and then kill the Darkness Metal, whereas like he could just potentially pop the Darkness Metal and then deal with the White Knight later. So, but I definitely think the correct play was summon Draco. But yeah, so I started off 6-0, and then I lost my last 2, and I ended up getting 3rd place. But it was pretty much really good because a really good tournament experience because I didn't really have expectations using this deck a week before the tournament, and then I just, a couple of days before, my friend convinced me to use it, and it was running really well, and it performed really well. So I was really happy with it, and it's a deck I made myself. So I didn't really feel like going into an event, taking on a bunch of mirror matches like with Vayu, and it's people know what I'm using, and so I just kind of wanted to use my own thing, kind of catch people off surprise, and I think I did that pretty well. Um, Now using this deck in the future, uh, I might tweak some things. A card that hurts this deck really hard is like DD Crow, because it interrupts the flow of the deck with Avarice and Stone Excavation, which can kind of hinder what you're trying to do and recycling your stuff. So, I mean, that was pretty much the only concern, like DD Crow, and then obviously Dark Arm Dragon. Like, those are like the only two cards I lost to the whole tournament. I lost to Dark Arm twice, and DD Crows was like a small hindrance. But other than that, the deck was amazing. So I expect this deck to be like really good in the future for Edison. I don't really see it going away. People may have to side like particular cards for this matchup, but then it's gonna make their siding against other matchups worse. And then they have to take on two different versions of dragons. So like Dragon Capture Jar doesn't do anything against this deck, and like some weird other dragon cards like Electric Virus probably isn't very effective because you just lose to the OTK. So it's definitely going to shake things up, and I'm just really glad I brought the deck to the meta, and I'm happy to see how it goes in the future. I definitely have like some ideas I want to do, but with the deck, but I'm not gonna give those away. I'm gonna bring those out in the future potentially, or I might just use a different deck, since people are gonna know this is a thing. So I don't know. It's all up in the air, but I definitely had a fun time in the Edison Legends, and shout out to the guys at Ed and Edison for just running the tournament and everyone else that was involved, and yeah, had a great time. And if you're still watching at this point, thanks for watching, and take care.